All right, so in this chapter, we are going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and that is keyboard shortcuts. Research studies have shown that you can save 1 hour of work for every 8 hours worked simply by utilizing keyboard shortcuts. If we look at the different menus and look at the different options, we can see there are shortcuts for some of those options. Plus, if we hover our tools over the tool panel on specific tools, we will see the name of the tool as well as the keyboard shortcut to easily and quickly access that tool. If you're not seeing this information when you hover over a tool, then you need to go back to Preferences and select Tooltips in the Generals tab. Alright, so we can also see all the available keyboard shortcuts by accessing the keyboard shortcut dialog box. And to do that, just go up to Edit and select Keyboard Shortcuts. Again, we can select application menus or panel menus, and this may look similar to the dialog panel that we accessed in the previous lesson on menus because both options are available in the same dialog box. We do have the menus tab here, and then we can always switch back to the actions tab from here. Alright, so like in the previous lesson on menus, you can customize your keyboard shortcuts for your specific workflow. So for example, if we press Command Z, that is an action to undo something, and that's the keyboard shortcut for undoing. And if you don't like that, you can change it to something else, like let's say the Control key and your spacebar. So you do have the option to customize your keyboard shortcuts as well as add keyboard shortcuts to items that do not have a keyboard shortcut yet. So we'll talk about that again in a second. All right, so you may also find a tool or option that doesn't have a keyboard shortcut assigned to it. If you find you're using it, let's say a specific action or tool on a regular basis, you can actually create a keyboard shortcut for it in this dialog box. Just click on this column under Shortcut and then press the keys that you want to use for your keyboard shortcut. If you type a keyboard shortcut sequence that is already assigned to another tool or option, then you're going to get an error. However, you can override this error and accept it by clicking on this button here that says Accept and go to Conflict. I don't recommend doing that though, so you'll need to change the keyboard sequence to something else. Creating a new keyboard shortcut is the easy part. However, trying to come up with a sequence that you can remember tomorrow or 6 months from now is the challenge. So try to create a keyboard sequence that is easy to remember and doesn't require a lot of steps. One of the things that you can do if you want to create one key keyboard shortcuts is to utilize your F keys. And those are simply located right at the top of your keyboard, and they are followed by a number like F1, F2, F3, etc. However, you may want to wait until we get to the section on actions before assigning those keys to keyboard shortcuts. That's because I utilize and assign my F keys to actions. So for example, when I click on F1, it will automatically run the action I've assigned to that key, which in this case will run my sharpening action. Doing it this way is much faster than coming over to the Actions panel, locating the action, trying to find it among all the different actions that I have, and then running it from the Actions panel. Instead, all I have to do is hit the F1 key. So what I've done is I've assigned my 8 most used actions to my F1 through F8 keys. And we'll talk more about this and how to set that up in the lesson on actions. Once you're done setting up your keyboard shortcuts, just make sure you click on OK, and that will save all your changes for you to use later on. Alright, so I'm going to share some of my most used keyboard shortcuts later on in the lesson, and I want to show you how easy it is to actually use keyboard shortcuts first. So if I want to add text to my project, I can come over here and select the text tool icon. Or I can select the letter T on my keyboard. Using the keyboard shortcut, again, is much faster than having to go back and forth between working on the project and then going back to the Tools panel to select another tool, or even going up to the menu to select the tool. As you're working, if you don't use keyboard shortcuts, you will find yourself going back and forth, and you're going to end up keep going back and forth again and again and again and again, and you're wasting all this valuable time. It may not seem like a lot at first, but seconds add up into minutes, minutes add up to hours, and by the end of the day, you're going to waste a lot of time going back and forth. Or we can learn the shortcuts. As you are working, keep one hand on your keyboard and the other on your mouse. All right, so you may be wondering, how many shortcuts do I actually need to learn? Well, Photoshop literally has hundreds of keyboard shortcuts. However, it's not necessary to learn them all. University studies show that there are 12 to 15 keyboard shortcuts that are important to your workflow. By learning those 12 to 15 keyboard shortcuts that are important to you and your workflow, will help you become more productive and have a fast, efficient workflow. Later on, we'll go over my 10 most used, and this will give you a head start so you can kind of start learning some of the basic ones that you might use on a regular basis. Even though these top 10 are specific to my workflow, I think you will find that these keyboard shortcuts will be useful for you as well. As you begin to use Photoshop more and more, you will learn the shortcuts that you will need for your specific workflow. In fact, you may have more than 12 to 15. Even though I have 10 of my favorite, I probably use anywhere from 30 to 35 different keyboard shortcuts for the projects that I work on. Also, a lot of the keyboard shortcuts that you use in Photoshop can also be used in other software, especially if you use other types of Adobe software like Adobe Lightroom or Adobe Illustrator or other types of Adobe programs. Plus, there are some keyboard shortcuts that you could use with other types of software like Microsoft Word, Excel, and others. For example, a universal keyboard shortcut is Command or Control. If you're on a Windows, you would use Control, and the letter P. Using this keyboard shortcut will give you the print dialog box for whichever program that you're in. So learning keyboard shortcuts isn't limited to just Photoshop. All right, so before we go on, I just want to quickly mention something else about this course. Throughout the course, I will be mentioning keyboard shortcuts as we work. The keys you will use to access a tool or option will be different if you're on a Windows computer versus a Mac computer. All right, so let's quickly go over those different key commands so you have a better understanding of which one to select for your computer. Most of the time, I will mention both the Windows and the Mac keys so you don't have to worry about going back and forth and try to figure out which key I'm actually referring to. All right, so first we have modifier keys. The main modifier key on a Mac is the Command key. However, on a Windows machine, you do not have a Command key and will instead use your Control key. It's the same key and gives you the same result. Next, we have a secondary modifier key, and those are your Option key if you're on a Mac, or Windows users will use the Alt button. Again, same key, just different names. Next, we have actionable keys, and those keys are the Return key on a Mac or the Enter key for Windows. I do use a Mac and will often refer to using the Return key, and if I do, then you know to use your Enter key if you're using a Windows-based computer. We also have one other actionable key, and that is the Delete key on the Mac, and Windows users will use the Backspace key. Again, same keys, different names. So if I say delete and you're using Windows, then just remember that you use your Backspace key instead since you don't have a delete key. I did put together a handy dandy printout that you can use for referencing the differences between Windows and Mac keyboard shortcuts. This is available after this lesson, and you can download it. It's a text file, print it out, and have it handy as you go throughout the course, so you don't have to worry about which one I'm actually referring to. You can just refer to the reference file and go from there. All right, so let's get back to keyboard shortcuts, and I will now provide you with my top 10 keyboard shortcuts that I use on a regular basis. These are excellent to learn first, and then you can add additional keyboard shortcuts to have a more efficient and productive workflow based on your own workflow. All right, so here they are in no specific order. If I want to add text to a project, I just press the letter T, and that will give me the type tool. Next, if I want to add a box, I press the letter U, and that will select the box tool. All right, so if we have a bunch of layers in our project and it's getting disorganized, what we can do is we can group those layers to help us eliminate some of the chaotic disorganization. So we just select some layers, and then I press the Command or the Control if you're on a PC and the letter G, and that will automatically group all those layers into one layer. All right, so the next keyboard shortcut that I use is Command and the letter S. This is the most used and important keyboard shortcut known to mankind. Here is my motto: if you make a change, then you should immediately save your change. This is the keyboard shortcut I use hundreds and hundreds of times while working on a project. The last thing I want is to have to start over because my computer crashed or the power went out and didn't save my work. I learned this the hard way by working on projects for hours and hours and not saving my work. It's very, very stressful having to start over from scratch because I didn't save my work from the beginning. So if you make a change, save a change. All right, so number 5 is the eraser tool. If I want to erase something, I just press the letter E, and that tool is provided for me instantly. All right, so number 6, there's a couple different ways you can access this tool, and it's the zoom tool. I do have a scroll wheel on my mouse button, and I can use that to zoom in. However, there are some cool options for using the zoom tool in general, and when I want to access that tool, I will press the letter Z on my keyboard to access that tool. All right, so the next one, if I want to make a selection for a project I'm working on, I can press the letter W, and that will give me the wand tool. Next, we have the letter X. The letter X will change the foreground and background colors so that they swap positions. So if you want your colors to change from foreground to background, just press the letter X, and it's automatically going to change that for you. All right, so another tool that I use often is the fill tool. If you're on a Mac, you're going to press the Command and Delete key, or if you're on a PC, you will select Control and the backspace key. So if you have a selection and want to fill it in with a solid color, you can use the keyboard shortcut to do this versus having to go to the menu. And finally, we have Undo, which is Command or Control if you're on a PC, and the letter Z. So if you want to quickly go back one step, just press the Command and the Z key, and that will undo your last step. All right, so there you have it, my top 10, and I've been using these same keyboard shortcuts for years, and now they are as easy as breathing. Seriously, it's second nature to me, and it will be for you too the more you use them. Keyboard shortcuts. Save up to 1 hour for every 8 hours worked. A must-have for a fast and productive workflow.